If you've paid any attention to the reviews on the INEOS Grenadier, probably the most contentious point is how it drives on the road. And the opinions range from it drives perfectly fine on the road to, my gosh, you'd have to be crazy to drive this thing on the road. Well, today we're going to give you our opinion on how the Grenadier drives on the road after 1,000 miles in multiple conditions. And we're going to tell you whether we think on-road performance is the Achilles heel of the INEOS Grenadier or whether we agree that it's really not a big deal. Along the way, we're going to tell you what we think they did well and what they might think about updating as they change model years. So come along, let's talk about it. First thing I want to do is talk about the model that we have because I think that makes a difference. So let's talk about the TrialMaster as we spec'd it. First thing I want to have a look at is the outside of the vehicle and what we've done that I think impacts the on-road handling. The first thing that we did that impacts the performance is going to be adding the additional or optional winch. So that's going to put more weight on the front end. INEOS does put different springs on to keep the ride height consistent, but we are heavier on the front end than a vehicle without the winch. The second thing that we've spec'd out, given this is the TrialMaster edition, are the BF Goodrich KO2 all-terrain tires. We've also spec'd the optional rock rails, which add about 100 pounds in total. So now let's take a look at the inside of the vehicle and how we spec'd it, because that's going to make a difference in its on-road performance as well. So the first thing that we optioned are the Safari windows, which are basically skylights that are removable. There's one on both sides. We've also spec'd this without carpet. So if you can see, we've got rubber floor mats, but we don't have carpet underneath. And carpet obviously helps keep it warm and is a sound deadener. So that does make a difference. The seat sits quite a ways up off the floor. So even though the vehicle itself sits relatively close to the ground, getting into it, you sort of have to step in and then hoist yourself into the seat. And speaking of the seats, these are Recaro seats. And in my mind, the jury's still out on this, how comfortable I think these are. And the issue that I have is that although they're comfortable seats, I'm a bit wider guy, and these bolsters tend to be at a pretty acute angle. So when I'm driving, my leg tends to sit on the bolster, not in the seat between the bolsters. And over time, that makes me move my leg around a little bit. I've not decided whether it's an issue or not yet, but it is something to mention if you're a little bit wider individual. One of the other things that I, having driven older vehicles, love about this vehicle that I have missed in so many of the new vehicles is a flat panel at the top of the door so that when I drive, I rest my elbow on the door and steer with one hand. I know that's old school, but from an ergonomic standpoint, I love that. Great job, INEOS. Now to the meat of the video. What is the Grenadier like to drive on the road, in my opinion? I think the first thing that you need to realize is that the Grenadier is a 3-ton, body-on-frame, solid axle vehicle. So don't jump in this expecting it to drive like a Porsche SUV or a BMW SUV. It's not going to drive like that. One thing that you do notice about this vehicle is that it does have some wind noise, particularly because we have the Safari windows. If you are driving into a headwind, you will get some wind noise coming into the cabin. I don't think it's as intrusive as in our Jeep JK with the hardtop on, but it does have wind noise. And if you think about it, this is a vehicle built by design to be utilitarian, which means it's a box, and it has noise like a box. Probably the biggest criticism that I've heard of the Grenadier is the steering. And I will admit that the steering in this vehicle is unlike most steering in cars anywhere today. Let me show you what it really does so that you know what that's talking about. So let's go around this corner, and I'm going to just take my hands off the wheel. So we've turned this corner now, and I'm taking my hands off the wheel, and as you can see, it's not correcting. It's continuing to turn, and in fact, it's still turning. And just now, we've come back to center. So the steering wheel does not recenter like a modern steering does. So, as you can see, if you take your hands off the steering wheel and just let the vehicle go, it will want to continue turning. Is that a problem? Only if you don't know about it and you take your hands off the wheel. If you're aware of the way it steers, all you do is you turn the wheel and then you help it unwind. It's not a big deal. But if you're unaware of it, it can surprise the hell out of you. All I'm saying is be aware of how the steering works. Once you drive it for 15 minutes, it becomes an absolute non-issue. But before you let somebody else drive it, make sure they're aware of the way it steers. Other than that, it's a much ado about nothing. Another part of the steering that has gotten a lot of attention from the media is the way that it steers on the highway. So not talking about unwinding, but just how it steers on the highway. And the first thing that I've noticed is that when you're coming into a sort of long sweeping corner on the highway, such as the one we have coming up, when you turn in, it takes a second for the body to kind of get into its lean, then the tires bite. This is a nose-heavy vehicle, the tires bite, and then you almost feel like you're into the corner a little too sharply, and you correct it back. So you get that sort of nose-biased understeer initially, and then you almost go into, I don't want to call it oversteer, but sort of an oversteer feeling because the tires have bit in and the body has settled down, and it just goes at that point. You don't get a lot of body roll, so it doesn't feel like you're out of control or anything like that. It's just that you've got to give the vehicle a second to dig in and set itself in the corner, and then everything is fine. Another item that's got a lot of attention, particularly on the Grenadier forum, is the sort of driving aids, if you will, in this overspeed warning. Let me show you what the overspeed warning does. So right now, according to the computer and accurately, our speed limit is 55 miles an hour. So we're going to go ahead and exceed that speed limit. And you can hear that series of clicks. That is the system warning you that you're exceeding the speed limit. On the highway, it's not a big deal. It does its series once, then it's done, and you can keep driving. But where people are getting sort of frustrated with it, and I agree with them, is that if you are in a city environment, if you're in stop and go traffic, it becomes constant. You get this constant clicking from the electronic nannies trying to let you know that you're speeding. Luckily, in the interim, before INEOS addresses this, which everyone hopes they're going to, if you go into your favorites, there is a button called overspeed warning that you can shut off. Now, you have to do that every time you start the vehicle, but that does turn off the nanny and it goes away. We're all hoping that INEOS comes up with a solution that we turn it off once, it stays off. And the last item I want to talk about on steering is that the center or on center field does have a dead spot. There's no denying that. And you do find yourself actively engaging in driving your vehicle. Now, I know that some people think that's a horrible thought. Personally, I don't mind it. Like the Jeep, this vehicle does require your attention, and it's not going to be as precise as our Corvette, for example. So you are going to find that you do have to move the wheel around a bit, particularly like today where we have a strong wind blowing across us, that you are going to have to work a little bit as you drive it. Is it something that you should shy away from? Personally, for me, not a bit. I expect it. It's the way this type of vehicle drives, and I will accept that for the benefits that you get off-road. Would it hurt my feelings if INEOS made a little correction to that? Not a bit. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them in future years sort of make some adjustments to the steering. But it doesn't bother me a bit. It's not fatiguing in any way. The steering on the Grenadier is a bit heavier, I think, than it is on our JK. And it's kind of funny because after driving the Grenadier, if I jump in the JK, it almost feels light and darty and almost anxious to drive it. This just feels sort of rock steady. One of the items when I first jumped into this that I noticed is that the steering wheel looked small, and sort of the steering wheel versus where I was sitting, it just looked small. And so I got my tape measure out, and the diameter of the Grenadier steering wheel is just about 14 inches. Now compare that to the steering wheel on our JKU, which is a little over 15 inches in diameter, and you can see why having a littler diameter, people might think that you really have to work that wheel a lot, because a smaller diameter wheel, you're going to have to turn more. And that may be one thing. Grenadier might think about putting a slightly bigger wheel in it, and that might alleviate some of the issues. Don't know, but just a thought and something that I noticed. This does have a large steering radius. It is not a pinpoint, point and shoot kind of vehicle. And what that means is that corners that could be 3-point turnarounds in most vehicles become 5-point turnarounds in this vehicle. Now, as you can see here, off-road, it's not a problem. And I'm not really having any trouble on this little trail making the corner. But where I have had issues is in parking lots. I've pulled into parking lots and almost thought I was going to hit a vehicle that was parked there because it took a wider turn. When I've tried to pull into a parking space, I've had to back up and straighten out and pull in again, just because this doesn't turn as tightly as most vehicles. Now, I think the Grenadier has gotten somewhat of a bum rap on that. It has about a 44.3 feet turning radius, if I'm correct. And the JL Unlimited, which is the new Jeep Wrangler Unlimited, does it in a little over 40 feet. So compared to the Wrangler, this takes another 4 feet to make that corner. But compared to the Gladiator, this actually turns sharper. And I've not heard a lot of people on the forums or on the car reviews complaining about the Gladiator's turning radius. So I think take it with a grain of salt. The other issue, or the other area where I think it could pose a challenge, is on very tight, twisty trails. I'm thinking Black Bear Pass, and I'm thinking specifically of one corner on Black Bear Pass that is very tight and was a 3-point turnaround on our JK Wrangler. I think this would be a 5-point turnaround. I just think it would make that type of trail a bit more challenging, but no more challenging than, again, in the Gladiator. So don't take it as something that, for an off-road vehicle, you should be afraid of. There's another ergonomic item that I think needs to be mentioned, is that even though the windows on the front doors are very large and you have a lot of viewing A lot of that viewing area for the windows is well forward, which is great when you're on a trail. You can see what's going on. But the B pillar, where I'm sitting, if I just turn my head directly to the left, half of my vision is blocked by the B pillar. So what I'm finding is that when I'm at a stop sign and want to check traffic or do something, I lean forward and I look out. And when I'm checking, sometimes I'm having to check behind if I'm at an angle. If you pull up to a stop sign and you're first in line and the stop sign is close, you have to do this because of the straight up and down windshield and the fact that it tilts down slightly. Now that's not much different than in the Jeep. Jeep has a straight up windshield. You're going to have less line of sight than you would if the windshield was tilted back. But you do have to look at that. And if you look at the passenger side, hi camera lady, if you're a very tall person and you move the seat all the way back, you basically are looking at the B pillar when you turn your head to the right. So you do have to lean forward if you want to look out the window, or you have to move the seat forward. So just kind of an interesting, unique bit about this vehicle, the way it's laid out. From a comfort standpoint, we haven't used the air conditioner yet, but the heater is hot. It works flawlessly. The automatic function works great. Camera lady and our son have both commented on how much they like the way the heated seats work in this. I mean, what would you say? They heat up quickly, but they then maintain a nice, comfortable heat?
Yep.
There you go. So from a comfort standpoint inside, at least from the front seats, so far it's been flawless. We haven't had any electronic boogeyman. There's been no strange warning lights popping up out of the blue. Everything has worked. Going through the favorite section, I don't sometimes understand the logic of why it goes where it goes, but it always does get me to where I want to be. From a powertrain standpoint, this vehicle does not feel underpowered to me at all. Now, the straight six BMW doesn't have a gob of horsepower. I think it's 280, something like that, but it never feels like it's lacking for power. It's got a nice grunt at the bottom end. It seems like it has pull no matter what range you're in from an RPM standpoint, and it just feels like it's not underpowered at all. The transmission, this is a beautiful transmission. It's almost, I guess the best way I can say it, and it's most complimentary way I can say it, is you don't even notice it's there. It shifts very smoothly, always seems to be in the right gear. I've never had to mess with it, and I've never noticed it, and I think that's a great compliment for the transmission. One item that I think is just a niggling item, it's not an issue really at all, but it's that the steering wheel has a centering line on it. And if you'll notice, when I'm going straight down the road, the centering line is not centered. So the steering wheel is slightly off center from the factory. I did go down, check out the drag links. All the lineup marks from the manufacturing are lined up. So basically this was put together with the steering wheel slightly out of line. It's an easy fix. It's nothing that I'm concerned about. But you know, it is something that you notice. So INEOS, little things. Another item that I think INEOS could have done differently, so I'm going to put it on the little niggling item list, is that the outside mirrors seem to me to be pretty small. I think they could have been larger. I know that would increase the wind noise potentially, but I think that's a trade-off that INEOS should have been comfortable with. And a couple items that people I've seen on other videos and reviews have complained about are view out of the back of the vehicle. If you're used to driving a sedan, then I think, yes, you would find that you can't see out of the back of this as well as you can out of those vehicles. You know, I've come out of a Jeep with oversized tires. That sets right in the middle of your view. This is fine. I can see what's behind me, and you know, I don't notice it, and I don't think it's a problem. Another thing people have complained about is the small size of the rear view camera. Yeah, I can see that. Larger would be better. But again, I'm coming out of a vehicle with no rear view camera. I don't have a problem with this. So again, I think a lot of the opinions on this vehicle are going to come based on what you're coming out of. One thing that did surprise me, and I am happy about, is that the Brembo brakes on this vehicle feel very good. They've got great stopping power. The pedal feels nice. It's easy to modulate. I was surprised at how well they bit for a vehicle like this. So I think they've done a great job with the brakes. So at the end of the day, what is my conclusion of the on-road performance of the INEOS Grenadier? I think it really depends on what your expectations were going into the Grenadier and what your driving experience has been and the vehicles that you've been in. If you are used to driving a vehicle that has solid axles and ladder on frame, then this is going to feel right at home, and you're not going to find it driving poorly in any way. You're going to find the ride to be firm but comfortable. I think you're going to find the steering to be exactly what you expected it to be. And overall, I think you're going to be very happy with the vehicle. If, on the other hand, you're coming out of a modern SUV, such as a Cayenne or an X5, something like that, and you're looking for the next stylish and sort of exclusive thing to have at the neighborhood or the mall or something like that, I think you might be disappointed in this vehicle. They say it's built on purpose, and I believe that. It's not built to be an around-the-town vehicle. Now, don't get me wrong, there's going to be a lot of people that use it for that, and if they want to use it for that, God bless them. It's not my business, but I don't think they will find it the best vehicle. Now, I've said the same thing about our Wrangler JKU. That's a very popular vehicle amongst the crowd that really never goes off-road, so, you know, who am I to say? They may love it, and they may value the exclusivity over the driving experience. So, you know, I think that if you like the vehicle for whatever reason you like it for, you'll be happy with it. But this is an on-road driving test, and I'm telling you what I think about driving this on-road. I hope our opinions of the on-road manners of the INEOS Grenadier were helpful to you. I hope you found it interesting, our insights. And if you're considering a Grenadier, I hope it helps you with that decision. If you like this kind of content, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. Give us a big thumbs up and share it with your like-minded friends. We do have some exciting stuff coming up for this vehicle, so stay tuned. And as always, take care, and we'll see you outdoors.